TNT Open Mind Insights brings you powerful, authentic conversations, illuminating the path to better mental health care for all.
I don't remember the first time we met. I feel like I've known you for a long time and you're so easy to get to know and to feel comfortable with. Um,
I think I know.
yeah?
So my brother, was a resident at the John Henry
hmm
Foundation starting in 2008, and you weren't there yet, but you came in like 2011,
hmm
and so for us as family members, you're getting to know the residents, and so you wouldn't have known the family members. But any new staff that comes in, we all knew
hmm
you
hmm
immediately. So
hmm
I knew you way before you knew me.
That makes sense.
So and then as you um, the position that you came in for, and then you
Mm.
advanced to the executive director as well as to the administrator, um, you were just more available to us as family members. So I think we got to know each other because of my brother Jim, who was living there and being able to figure out how best to serve him in a residential setting. And I began to really trust you in your judgment. And if you were to call and say, Jim seems to be struggling with X, Y, and Z, what are we going to do about it?
hmm
And then you're the professional who would take care
hmm
of that.
hmm
And that was the benefit of being in a residential setting and having somebody like you at the helm.
Well, it's funny because I think that my most profound memories of you early in our relationship, before Jim was diagnosed with cancer and we were dealing with any of that, was you at family meeting with your mom and her being in a wheelchair and the love that emoted off of you towards her, that was always the same way that you were towards your brother, and you have this brightness about you, and that was the first time that I remember really connecting with you. And it's funny because I've always worked with individuals with challenges and I've worked with families, but to have the family meeting the way that it was constructed, and it was a great opportunity to connect. And I just remember that after that meeting, that we now had forged a relationship, right? So the
Mhm.
path to when we discussed any difficulties or anything we needed to do to support your brother, that foundation of a relationship was so natural because of the way that we connect with our families in those family meetings. So I remember that really
Mhm.
vividly. And
And
it's
then
exciting to me. Oh, sorry.
go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, but it's been really exciting for me over the course of the years of our relationship, first to work with you as a sister and then now to have you as the board chair. It's been exciting, and it's also really neat because I already know who you are as a person, and I know the way that you love the people that you love, and I know the way you conduct yourself. And so when you expressed interest in joining the board, I was so delighted, and it's a real gift to work with you in this capacity. And the work that you do as a volunteer board member is it's phenomenal, and I'm able to rely on you so much, and it really makes a difference for my daily work. So I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
You're
It's
welcome.
fulfilling. It's fulfilling work because it's important work. It's what needs to be done. There's not enough treatment available for people who suffer with schizophrenia spectrum disorders, as we all know. So when you find a program that's like this, that's making a real difference and improving the lives of every single person who lives there, as well as their families' lives, because that they're unburdened from having to provide the primary care for their ill loved one. Um, we all know that that's work that needs to be done. So, and I feel like you and I work really well together and we have the same goal, which is to provide the best care that we possibly can for our residents and for their families so that they can have a life that is fulfilling for them, not just the person who's ill, but also the family who for quite some time was robbed of having a fulfilling life because they spend so much time looking after their loved one and managing a really complex health condition that most of the time, I know I wasn't trained for it, none of
Yeah,
us were.
yeah.
So, then to have that residential piece where you have professionals who are doing that work, it's a gift to the families. So, vice versa, but we really appreciate you and your staff and your leadership, especially, with our really amazing team. And you're celebrating your 14th year this
This week.
week,
hmm
and we have staff members that have been there even longer than you, if you
hmm
can imagine. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it says something about the program.
Well, that was a gift to me too, to arrive to amazing families and amazing staff members, some of whom I've been able to promote in the time that I've been there, and to watch their development has been amazing. And I think we're doing something really special. So It's funny because I think there's been such a change over the decades that I've been in social services, and at one time I know people might have thought, gosh, is it a conflict to have family members on the board? Does that make the job more difficult? And my experience has been the opposite. My experience has been that the focus of the families is on the well-being of the residents in the program in such a pure way, without it being about ego. It's about the program. And so when I come to talk about something, oftentimes it's the family members that are on the board that can help the other members kind of understand certain perspectives that are immeasurably helpful.
Right.
So to me, having family members on the board is something that should be a goal for the organization forever, in perpetuity, because it makes a real difference.
In terms of what the John Henry Foundation provides in terms of residential services for adults who have schizophrenia spectrum disorders, what do you consider the biggest challenges that we're facing?
I have a multi-pronged answer probably to that because it is a really complex question. One thing that continues to really astound me, despite all of the advances that have been made in behavioral health, and despite the fact that we as a society are talking so much about mental health in such a positive way, really embracing the need for good mental health, we are still, as a society, really struggling to comprehend the needs of the severely mentally ill. And you and I were chatting recently about that.
Mhm.
Yes, we need to focus on mental health and talk about mental health for, for example, all of the school age kids that went through COVID and the impacts that that had. For example, talking about mental health in the workplace, things like that. But when you're talking about mental illness,
It's a
it's a
different
different
subject.
conversation.
Mhm.
It's a different conversation, and I don't think that we're really having the conversation about what do we need to do as a society to help people to find stability
Mhm.
and maintain stability.
Mhm.
A lot of the conversation is about some of the terms recovery and things like that that we may hear, where it might be more applicable in a substance use program,
Yep.
where someone may be struggling significantly and need really intensive services. But once they're stable, then they're able to sort of go on with their lives, for lack of a better description. But for people like the folks that we serve, this is a chronic lifetime condition.
That has to be managed
It has to
day
be
by day, and
managed.
it's not something that you're ever going to fully recover from. Every day you're managing it. I think that one of the biggest misconceptions going along with what you're saying is that, um, and we talk about this a lot. Our program is residential, but we don't have an end date. And a lot of residential programs have a 6 month, 1 year, or 18-month end date because schizophrenia is fixed in that period of time. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, what I think that the challenge is to um, connect with people and get them to understand that this is a lifelong illness. This is not something that you recover from easily. And some people will achieve a certain amount of um, stability that will allow them to live what we may consider a normal life, but many will not be able to achieve that stability in any sort of lasting, meaningful way. So, what we're doing is we're giving everyone in our program a chance to live whatever their best life looks like. And their best life might not look like everybody else's best life. So I feel like it's important that we do a better job of defining that mental health and mental illness are actually two different subjects.
Yeah, I agree. Our clinical director has said many times, our goal is not weight loss, which is one of the things we help with healthy living. So many folks with severe mental illness suffer from obesity and all that that means in terms of their health. Our goal is not getting back to work or taking a class. Our goal is stability. That is always the goal.
Mhm.
And as a side effect of stability, if you are able to really eat differently and fully participate in our exercise program, then you might lose weight. You might be able to go back and take a college class. You might be able to get a part time job, but that isn't the goal of the program. And part of the reason that that's so important is it isn't about get better, achieve the certain amount, and now you're good. We're just going to coast because the illness also changes.
Mhm.
Um, And people can have a stressful life event, the death of a parent
Yeah.
or some kind of a health change that they might not be able to navigate by themselves. And the support of a residential program means that as the needs of an individual changes, that support can change.
Mhm.
So when people are to a point, like at our program, where they're able to work a part-time job, they would need necessarily less support typically when they're functioning at that level. Yet then something might happen, a significant event, and we're there to walk them through it and help them maintain stability. And it's those stressful times that people often become non-compliant in treatment.
Mhm. And stop
Um,
taking their
yep,
medication.
to disastrous results. And so we are there to support, provide programming, help build meaningful lives for people living with schizophrenia. But you know what? We're also there as a safety net.
Mhm.
And sometimes when people living with schizophrenia are dealing with stress, good or bad, and they have an increase in symptoms, I said sometimes, I think it's probably more often than that, they're the last ones to notice that they're having more symptoms.
Mhm.
And when you have a treatment team that involves the families, that's people that know you well, then we can start to point it out. Hey, you've been pointing out that you're not sleeping very well. Let's talk about that.
Mhm.
Oh no, I'm sleeping just fine. Yet we know 3 different conversations happened where they reported difficulty sleeping, and a lack of sleep can actually contribute to increased symptoms as well, right?
Absolutely.
So we've got that safety net. And outside of residential care, when you take someone to their psychiatry appointment and they're seeing someone every 6 weeks, for example, which would be typical, if not more often than what's typical, they're not going to have enough information in that appointment to find out how the person is really doing.
And that's when they're the slippery slope of decompensating. And without the right treatment team around them, the likely outcome is going to be that they're going to become medication non-compliant.
Yeah.
Then you go to instability, and from instability, a lot of really bad things can happen, including attracting the attention of law enforcement. And all of a sudden, now you're in jail with a criminal record. So, the things that we do in residential treatment is to prevent those very real consequences that happen in our population when they're living out in the community without any sort of meaningful supervision. So, what we're able to do is prevent all of those, not all, but a lot of those really bad things from happening.
Well, and when a big psychotic episode happens, there is the recovery often looks different than, or the stability looks different than it did beforehand. So each time that we allow someone to go through an episode where they're not compliant with their medication or not taking their medication correctly, experiencing a duration of psychosis, it number one, it will take them quite a long time to get back to their baseline.
Yeah,
And what we find is oftentimes their baseline has changed.
it's gone lower.
And we as a society, unfortunately, there's great programs that are being built that are doing a lot of transitional work for our population, but there is not a lot of funding or focus on what we're providing, which is this long-term home with a therapeutic treatment team around you. And, I really believe, and I know that we really believe that that avoids hospitalizations. It avoids involvement in law enforcement and the care courts, which are doing a great job. But let's try to keep people out of the
Right,
court.
exactly.
We're in this situation where we go from crisis to crisis, and this is something family after family has told me about as well, until you find that stability. And once you find it, you need to keep it in place. Rather than removing it, okay, everything's better, go ahead and go on with your merry life,
Mhm.
because there's a desperate need, and jumping from crisis to crisis is not an appropriate way to work with the population we serve. It's
Right.
not good enough. And I think that people living with schizophrenia in many ways have to work harder to be successful in treatment than people that are living with a myriad of other
It's
conditions.
true.
It's harder to get up in the morning for many people. It may be harder to shower. It's harder to get to group. You may be hearing voices that are telling you that you can't trust the people that are there to support you. So all of the successes that we see at the program, I love telling the residents, and I know that you know this, the best thing about the program are the residents.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, one of the things that it's a joy to actually be at the John Henry Foundation because I have made very significant friends with the residents, and we have our girl posse,
Mhm.
and boy, do we gossip like all girls do. um, But the things that they do every single day are harder, I think, than what a lot of CEOs do every single day.
I think so
When
too.
you can't trust your mind to give you information that's accurate, when you're looking over your shoulder because you think somebody in a shadowy figure is following you, to me, that would be very distressing. I'm certain I would never get out of bed. I would be there with my covers directly over my head at all
Mhm.
times, um, terrified of the big world. And yet, this is their actual reality. And they get up every day and they make their bed, take a shower, get to our group meeting in the morning to find out what's happening during the day, and then participating uh, joyfully with what's going on at the program all day long. I mean, I think that that's really a strength that you don't understand until you witness it and know how hard it is for the little things that we would consider activities of daily life for them to engage in and be successful in with all of the obstructions they have to accomplish those tasks. It's really it's brave. And I think to one of our residents whose family was very successful father, and all the siblings were very successful, and the son has schizophrenia and lives at our program. And the father one time said, "I'm the most proud." I mean, I think his sons were like doctors and CEOs, and they're all multimillionaires and everything. He said, "My biggest pride is my son here at the John Henry Foundation, because he realizes that what he accomplishes day to day takes a lot more guts and a lot more tenacity than any other job that his other kids were doing that would be considered ridiculously successful."
Yeah.
So I thought that spoke really deeply to me when he said that.
Yeah.
Why do you think that you picked this particular job as your career?
I grew up in the field of social services. My father started a nonprofit in Cook County, where I'm from, serving people with developmental disabilities. And so my first volunteer opportunity was working at one of their events. My first fundraising opportunity was going door to door to try to compete to win a bicycle by the most funds raised, knocking on doors. I won that bicycle, by the way.
Of course you did.
I grew up in the field, and I saw that my mom did to support my dad. She also worked full time, but in the evenings, as my dad was building the business, all the hours and dedication that they put in, and the pride that my father had for what he did to make our world a better place, um, and all the demands, I saw them firsthand. And so when I was in college, I was very interested in human services, but I didn't really know which direction that I would go. And I wound up in a social work position after college. And when I went to my father and said, "This is the field that I want to be in," and he told me he was incredibly proud. And also, remember, it's hard sometimes. It can be angering, it can be sad, it can be frustrating, but I wouldn't have chosen anything different. And so I've worked with different populations. I've worked with blind children, I've worked with preemie babies, I've worked with older folks. And this particular population, the job came around at a time that was perfect for me. And as I met people and did the interviews, every single person I met came across as just a really good human being. And that's the kind of place where I want to work. So I joined the community, and I had worked with people living with schizophrenia, but not to this level before. And in the 14 years that I've been there, I've absolutely fallen in love with what we do for 100 reasons. I really believe in people. I really believe in our ability as humans to work together to make our society better. And I think that can start very small scale. It is difficult working in mental health because we are supposed to, as professionals, maintain boundaries, to maintain our own mental well being, and to make sure that our decisions are made for the right reasons. Working this closely with people living with schizophrenia, people I admire
Mhm.
and respect so much, it is very difficult to maintain that boundary.
Absolutely.
Um, I feel that my work is always professional, but when you see the kinds of symptoms that I've seen, when you see what people have to push through for on just a regular day, it provides me with such immense respect, and I can't help but fall in love with that. And that inspires me every day. I've seen people living with schizophrenia lose family members. I've seen people living with schizophrenia be diagnosed with cancer. I've seen them rise to occasion after occasion when other people might falter. And I have been impressed every day of the work being done there. And I want to be a part of it.
Well, I think that we both agree there's a difference between mental health and mental illness. Mental illness is very challenging to deal with. A combination of our really experienced, caring, astute medical team, our long term, very caring staff, and the family support. Those three things are really hard to find in one program.
Mhm.
That team is what makes it possible to do the work that we do. And you mentioned something a little while ago about a resident might have a particular challenge in their life. So they've got all of these for lack of a better word, they've got all these eyes on target that know them, can see when they're struggling, probably know how to help them through that struggle. And you've got the team in place. If you say, I need a med change, you've got a doctor who will write that prescription right then. We also have the added benefit of our lovely pharmacy who will bring that medication to us within the hour if necessary. So we really do have a great combination. We're in a very unique position that we have all of the ingredients to really do a good job, and we do a really good job every single day. And I don't want to disparage. There's a lot of other residential programs that are quite good, but they're also ridiculously expensive. So we have care for an affordable price. Um, that is successful, and that's the other piece of the program. If all of our residents were decompensating and, sitting on a bench talking to themselves, that's not a good look. It's not what our residents do. So it really is that combination of the medical team, the really well qualified staff, family support, and all of the vendors even our trash guy who comes and gets our trash cans loves our residents. I
Mhm.
mean, that just says something about the way that the program runs. Um, I would say that people call it the secret sauce. I've heard that word a lot. What's your secret sauce? Secret sauce is the people. We're really really lucky, and we try to reward the people for the good work that they're doing, and it is reflected in how well our residents do on a day to day basis. I think.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, we've talked in the past about the funding for board and cares for people living with severe mental illness, and that the funding just isn't there. So if you are trying to run a residential facility in the community for people with schizophrenia and other similar conditions, the reimbursement rate is something like $1,250 a month. And with that money, you're supposed to have the building, pay the insurance, pay the staff, pay for the food, pay the utilities. And especially, when you look at Orange County or really anywhere in California at this point, you can't even rent a place for 1250. So there's an unfortunate situation where facilities that accept that rate, it just doesn't pencil in order to have a budget. We have a donor community that's been incredibly
We're
generous
very
to us.
fortunate. We're very fortunate. They
We've
see the
gotten
good work we're doing, and they know that they'd like to invest in it,
Yeah.
and that's been really beneficial to us.
When we have people who donate year after year
Yep.
and are angels for our program, that's made a huge difference.
Yeah.
So we're trying to keep things as affordable as possible. But one of the things that I found throughout that process in working with the board, I have never been asked to make that possible, to have a balanced budget based on staffing shortages, based on low quality food, based on not replacing things that are broken. That has never been considered acceptable the entire time I've been a part of the organization. And if there was a different view, I don't think I would have stayed all this time.
Right.
But when we have meetings and we talk about what is the program? The program is the people. The program is the people who live there and the team of people who take care of those individuals, and treating the professionals who come to work every day to work with the severely mentally ill well is one of the most basic things that we should expect. And so knowing that the organization believes that a good program requires quality, that's a great place to start from.
Agree.
It really is, and it makes me incredibly proud of the organization as well. Um, at this point, there are some interesting things going on in the state. They're funding some new initiatives and some things that are focused on community providers, and so hopefully that's really a sign of things moving in the direction where the people that are closest to those we serve are in a better position for decision making in terms of giving guidance to the funders. And hopefully we can make a real difference. I see a lot of people up to, Sacramento and beyond that want to know what we're doing and how we're doing it and are coming and seeing our program,
Right.
which is wonderful.
And everybody who comes says we need to have a John Henry Foundation in every single county
Yeah.
because there's such a need. I mean, we have 70 people at any given time that are interested parties in coming to live
Yeah.
at the program, and we simply don't have the number of beds to accommodate everybody. So, yes, everybody would like to have the John Henry Foundation in every single county, and I think that if that could be a goal, because it works. We've proven it for 36 years.
Hmm.
This is how to serve people who have a really terrible illness, who typically end up failing in the community. Our people are thriving in our community and able to engage with the outside community as well. Um, and they're not using law enforcement dollars. They're not in psych units at $1,400 a day plus. They're not homeless, which is another big pot of money that goes from particularly the state of California to try to figure out housing for the homeless people. We're not doing any of that. We're a very affordable program that if it could be in fact replicated up and down the state so that there would be this in every community, it would, first off, they would all be full and they would be a wiser use of money than the other options that we have. The only one that's would be a less option is for those who end up in cemeteries, and they can end up in cemeteries for any number of ways. Sometimes it's self-inflicted, sometimes it's inflicted by the police, sometimes because of the lack of understanding of things, they can get into very dangerous situations that they end up losing their lives. All of these things are happening every single day. If there was more of what we did across the board, most of those really terrible and very expensive things wouldn't need to happen. There would be a place for somebody who has this terrible illness to live and live successfully and live in a fulfilling way that they feel like they too are contributing in some way, shape, or form. So, yes, when everybody comes and visits and says there needs to be one of these in every county, there sure does.
Mm.
There sure does. I sure wish there was the money for that. So, along those lines, in California, we recently passed Prop 1, which was the adoption of the original the MHSA, the Mental Health Services Act that passed in 2004. All of it was called the millionaire's tax. All of that was supposed to go for mental health care. Mental illness, mental health, they're usually in one bucket. They're not supposed to be in one bucket. Mental illness is different than mental health. Mental health, mental illness should be benefiting hugely. So the MHSA didn't work very well. There was too many hurdles to clear for most agencies to get this money, including the John Henry Foundation, who does everything right. They should be handing money to us, but that's a whole different story. So now the Prop 1 comes in, and that's supposed to have taken the MHSA, made it more accessible for things like housing and more services and crisis centers and law enforcement intervention that wouldn't require only police but would also require um, uh, like a social worker. All of those things are supposed to be happening. So we rightly, I think, felt like we would be included in those new funds. We can prove we do everything right. You can come and have somebody live at our foundation for a month and figure out what we're doing and see that we're doing everything right. And yet we are excluded from the Prop 1 money. And nobody's been able to explain to me why that's the case. And we've now come across other facilities. We just toured one this afternoon. Does similar things to what we're doing for the same population. They also are getting no Proposition 1 money. Where is this money going? I don't understand. And we've been looking and we were asking a lot of questions. And unfortunately, I haven't come across anybody that can give me the right answer. But then we're also being hurt by it because, like at our fundraiser last October, some of my friends are like, "Oh, you guys don't need to do fundraisers anymore. You guys must be rolling in money because you're providing the services that Prop 1 is supposed to be supporting."
Mhm.
Nope.
Mhm.
We haven't seen a penny of that. So if there's somebody who can help to unleash this Prop 1 money for places like the John Henry Foundation, replicate the John Henry Foundation in every county as everybody would like, help some of these other really good residential programs, I'm telling you, it would help a lot. The whole state of California would benefit, and it would be the cheapest way to do it. Certainly cheaper than incarceration
Yeah.
and cheaper than psych units.
Yeah.
That's my soapbox, and I'll get off of it for now.
One of the things I didn't really realize before I worked at the John Henry Foundation was the myriad of ways and the complex ways that schizophrenia affects the individual. I think there's obviously a lot of focus on things that make for interesting movies, delusions, hallucinations, hearing voices, things like that. I think when you hear the word schizophrenia, that's where a lot of people's minds go. As I've worked with the residents and as the clinical staff have taught us about this illness, I've learned that it impacts every area of functioning, and it can create the positive symptoms that I just named, but it can also cause some devastating negative, what we call negative symptoms, that make it very difficult to process information depending on how the person's doing, make it very difficult, as we've mentioned, to get up and take a shower, that make it very difficult to follow up on trying to find a job, much less showing up to the job interview because you might be paranoid about the person who's doing the interview. They're battling such a severe illness, and there are other conditions that we, especially here in California, do a really good job of serving, that we do a really good job of providing funding and support for. If you have autism, cerebral palsy, other conditions, we take pretty good care of folks. We provide residential care, we provide day programming, we provide recreation services, we provide vocational training. Yet our population, who is suffering from one of from the most severe mental illness, round and after round of funding, round after round of consideration of what's happening with the homeless folks on the street, all the people that are in jail dealing with schizophrenia and other psychosis-related disorders, we just have somehow not gotten to the place where we can all accept stability is a really great place to be. But that doesn't mean that you just then go on with your life as a person living with schizophrenia. The structure and support to maintain that stability needs to also remain. And relying only on family members who are often ill-equipped despite the amount of love that they might pour into it to manage the condition, to keep their loved ones on their medications, to provide a community. We've talked about this over and over again. We as people need other people. The isolation that the people living with schizophrenia experience, all of those things, symptom management, keeping people on medications, providing a community, providing purpose, those things can be provided in a residential setting. There is a huge need. There's a clamoring for it. There are so many families that are looking for support. And there's a dramatic shortage because there's either the SSI SSP rate, which is that $12.50 a month, or there's nothing. And at our program, we figured out a way to make it work because of the vision of the board. But people living with schizophrenia, spectrum disorders, deserve better than what we're doing. And what we're doing is surprisingly little aside from emergency response.
Mhm.
And, we have, our program is educated police officers. We have good partnerships with emergency services folks. And they're always so curious and interested in what we're doing and impressed by what's happening at the program. Emergency services personnel also need us to do a better job of serving people living with schizophrenia. Um, the emergency rooms have other people to care for, and having our folks constantly in a state of emergency, we
Not our
can do
folks,
better
but
than
our
that. Not
yeah,
our folks, right? But having people living with schizophrenia in this sort of a setup, where again, it's you found stability, now go on with your life,
Mhm.
is not a realistic approach to a severe mental illness. It's not. And we can do better, I believe. And I think we have a lot of good people who are working on it. But one of the things people need to know is residential care has to be a part of that picture.
Yep, and it has
It
to
is
have the
so,
proper funding.
yep, it is sadly,
Overlooked.
yep, yeah.
If anybody who's been watching this discussion wants to learn more about what we're doing at the John Henry Foundation or about residential treatment in general, we should probably offer them some sort of contact information so they can get in touch with us. And I nominate you.
So our website is at www.johnhenry.org. On the website, we have some information about schizophrenia, and you can come and take a look at what we're doing at our program, get a little glimpse into the program. There's also on the website there's a contact email, and you can send an email
Isn't
to
it
that. It's
info at johnhenry.org?
info@johnhenry.org,
Okay.
and if you send that comes to me.
Okay.
And so you can email that as well if you have any questions. One of the things that we like to do when we encounter community members is to share other resources. And so we are always compiling options for people. We really like to provide support, and so that's one thing that we do. We are also we've trained professionals and people in the community. That's something that we're also interested in doing. So if someone feels that they can be a part of helping with the goals that we have as a program, one of them is expanding what we're doing. We need money for that. So if people are interested in donating towards it, we would love that. We also work really closely with the healthcare professionals for all of the residents that we serve, and that's something that we're really interested in as well. If there's a training opportunity there, we
Sure.
would be
They're
able to offer that. And
both of
we've,
our doctors do immense amounts of training. So
yeah,
if anybody can benefit from getting information from them directly, we could help to set up those trainings.
absolutely. We partner with NAMI. We've done a bunch of trainings with
Yep.
NAMI, and we
And the
presented at
police.
different,
Yep.
yeah,
Everything.
we've done presentations at different conferences and things like that. So, really, it's twofold. One is if you want to get in contact with us about what we're doing at at the John Henry Foundation. The other piece of it is, please help us to advocate for our population and to help others to recognize the need that there is, because it's significant.
Absolutely. Absolutely.